Hey guys, it's Q&A Tuesday, and today we got a good one for you. But before I get into it, I wanted to show you what's on my wrist before I forget, but I'm not going to get into any details. I'm simply going to show you the watch, because this is a watch I want to talk about on what's on my desk. It's a new pickup on my collections. Seemingly an AP offshore, but this is not just any AP offshore, and I will talk about this on the next episode of What's on My Desk. So for now, let's dive into some questions. I got some really good ones. First one is going to be from Dimitri Fishbane, whose questions I have answered before in the past. Roman, this is the most kick-ass video up to date. The Valachi papers of the watches. Thanks, Dima. Question on the dark side. How do you protect yourself from stolen watches? What is the market for hot watches? We all know plenty of people that prefer luxury over honesty. Thanks. I want to talk about this because this is actually an important topic for you guys out there. There are a few websites out there that list serial numbers of stolen watches. How reliable are those? I don't know, because at the end of the day, somebody sat there and put it all together. I don't know if it's based on submissions of people who had their watches stolen or not, or a collection of something or the other. But in reality, there's unfortunately no real way to protect yourself 100%. However, there are steps to buy wiser in that respect. Any watch out there has the potential to be a stolen watch. And don't tell yourself for a second that it only goes for pre-owned watches. Yes, mostly it'll probably be pre-owned, but there are plenty of stolen new watches out there. In cases where somebody went, stole somebody's credit card, went into a store, bought a watch, there you go, it's brand new with boxing papers and everything else, right? So what do? One thing I always tell you, if something is too good to be true, it usually is. If you're out there shopping for a $10,000 watch and there's somebody out there offering to you for $6,000, red flag. Right away.
Right away.
Who you buy from? And again, I've talked about this before. Make sure you buy from somebody reputable. Make sure you have recourse if something were to go wrong. Whether it's purchasing with a credit card. Again, knowing who you bought from. Having a track record of transaction. If somebody out there is asking you to pay cash for their watch, or because they don't know you, or because there's a red flag. Nobody out there in their right mind in today's day and age, especially in the United States of America, is going to ask you to pay cash for anything, because that's just not something anybody wants to deal with. I don't want to deal with cash. I don't want to have to answer the IRS why somebody brought $50,000 in cash into my office and picked up a watch, right? If somebody actually wants to do that, it's not a problem. If it's an over $10,000 transaction, you fill out a form, I take your identification, I take that money, I take it to the bank, end of story. I have a track record, no skin off my back. If I, as a seller, on my website or on my eBay store or anywhere else, put in there, the only way we do business is if you bring me a bundle of cash. Would you want to buy from me? Today's day and age, absolutely not. Maybe 30, 40 years ago that was the case, but not anymore, right? The landscape has changed. PayPal, you're protected. Credit cards, you're protected. I buy everything with my Amex. I don't mess around. Any significant purchase, or non-significant purchase for that matter, I buy with my Amex because I have recourse with Amex. I pick up the phone and say, hey, this guy's a fraudster, I never got what I got. No questions asked, I get refunded. They do an investigation and it's done. The first thing you want to do when you want to check a watch is you contact the manufacturer. Anybody out there that has a particular watch that has been stolen from them from one time or another, for the most part, not always, report this with the manufacturer. And these manufacturers that have these stolen watch lists, they're not available to the public. They're usually available to some dealers or for those that have relationships and so on and so forth. Over the years, I myself have developed relationships with enough dealers where I can call and I can check a watch. Well, I can call a dealer who can in turn call a company and say, how is this watch? And the company will come back and say, hey, nothing is ringing on the serial number, you're good to go. And that's one way of doing it, but it's still not 100%. Because if a watch gets stolen from someone, that still does not mean that that particular individual claimed it with the company. Usually when you get a watch stolen from you, you do a police report and you most likely will claim it. Your insurance company, most of you probably have your watches insured. If you don't, you should. And that's where it stops. Police report, insurance company. Where do you get that information? That's not readily available. You can't call the police and say, oh, I just bought this AP, serial number 12345. Has this ever been reported stolen? Where? In your district or the 50 million other police districts that are out there all over the world, right? No such database again. But again, the easiest way to protect yourself is first and foremost, if you feel something is shady, right off the bat, you should just say, you know what, this doesn't feel right, I'm gonna stay away from this transaction. If everything seems to be great, you're buying from a reputable dealer, you have a recourse of actions, but you're still not sure, maybe something doesn't sit right with you, a lot of times it doesn't have boxing papers, which most would say is a red flag, but it's not. The amount of boxing papers that get lost for watches that are less than a year old, you'd be surprised. Not to mention watches that are a bit older. We sometimes lose boxing papers for certain watches that we buy because we can't find them, or a particular box, or it's a piece of paper that gets shipped in separately a month later from a watch that I bought, gets lost somewhere, or gets put away on a shelf with some other extra stuff, and when we end up finding it a year later, it happens. You know what I mean? These are physical things, you know? Yes, we keep all our watches in a bank vault, but the boxes and the papers, you can imagine that's out there sitting on shelves. Somebody could have made a mistake and shipped the wrong set of papers to a dealer for a watch that I sold at a show 30 days ago, and then I'm looking for those papers and they're nowhere to be found. Even though everything is labeled and has a serial number on it and a UPC code that I scan with a gun in shipping room, still it happens. It happens every day. It's called a human factor. So boxing papers are not a red flag. But let's say there are no boxing papers and it does raise a red flag within you. Pick up the phone, email the company, do something, and say, guys, I'm purchasing this watch from another individual. This is the serial number of the watch. Does this watch check out with you? If they tell you yes, you should feel about 80% more comfortable. But unfortunately, there is no 100% way to protect yourself from stolen watches. I've had stolen watches show up in my individual stock that I in turn went and sold to a dealer who sold it to somebody else. And then that particular consumer sent it in for service and the company told him, oh, this watch is on our stolen list. What happened? The company keeps the watch. He goes to the dealer I sold it to. The dealer calls me. I call the dealer I bought it from. I've told you guys before, recourse. And in case of the wholesale business or the B2B business, the recourse is dealing with somebody reputable. Because I've told you numerous times, anybody's word in this business and reputation is worth more than gold. If you happen to have sold a stolen watch, obviously without knowing about it, the recourse is very, very simple. The dealer buys a watch from me. I buy it from a guy X. He comes back to me. Of course, I do my due diligence to make sure that I did actually sell him that watch, which is pretty easy. I go into my accounting and I check it out. Everything is by serial number. And I write him a check, no questions asked, without getting the watch. Remember, the company kept the watch. I then in turn call this other dealer and I tell him, hey, the watch you sold me 6 years ago ended up being a hot watch. A guy sent it in for service and the company said that the watch was reported stolen 10 years ago or something. And he in turn says, okay, not a problem. Here's your check. And then he deals with it wherever he bought it. If he bought it from an individual consumer, somebody, or somebody offered it to him online, like a lot of customers will send in trades and things of that nature, then guess what? He's stuck with the money because odds are he won't get a hold of that customer and get his money back, and this is where the ball stops, or it continues rolling downhill or uphill, however you want to look at it. This is how it's done in our business. At any given point in that chain, if one of the dealers says, screw you, I don't want to deal with this, that's going to hurt him more than it's going to help him. References are an everyday occurrence in our business. Hey, do you deal with such and such? Is it good for me to send him $30,000 watch without paying me? He's paying me in 30 days? Yeah, absolutely. Hey, is X good? I'm looking to buy some watch from him, but you know what? I ended up buying a hot watch from him. He never gave me my money back, told me to go scratch. I suggest you don't deal with him. And that's how you would get hurt in the long run. So for the most part, it's an easy, peaceful process. Nobody raises any panic in case a stolen watch comes about, and it happens. It happens all the time. Are there consumers out there buying used watches and been wearing a used watch for 10 years, not knowing that it was stolen? Absolutely. How big of a percentage is that? It's tiny. How many people prefer luxury over honesty, meaning that they go out there and specifically buy hot goods, knowing that there are hot goods and paying a lot less for them? A few, but not as many as you think, and the reason for that is because in today's day and age of technology, this is actually very difficult to get away from. If somebody finds out you have this watch and it's actually stolen, whether you get it serviced or whatever you might end up doing with it, it gets taken away. If you want to buy a $20,000 watch and a hot one is going to cost you 10, but you stand a chance of then completely losing it, what the hell's the point of doing it? To me, it's like buying fake watches. If you can't afford something, don't go out there and buy a fake version of it, or don't go out there and buy a hot version of it, as you called it. Back in the day, there were a lot of stolen goods out on the market in places like 47th Street and other jewelry districts and so on and so forth, because there was really no repercussion. You know, people didn't have computers in their offices just yet. There was no internet. There was no phone call you could make to check certain things, and people weren't really concerned with that back then. But nowadays, you know, the luxury over honesty thing, it's sort of a dying thing. I can't think of anybody out there that would want to go out there and buy themselves a hot watch to save a few bucks. So, Dimitri, hope that answers your question. Here's another good question that has the word market value or market price without the word good investment, or not surprisingly. This one is from Chris Demetrio. Great content, Roman. Thank you, Chris. What are your thoughts on the brand H. Moser? Also, if I'm looking to find the most accurate market price for a watch, how would someone be able to calculate it? Look at that. We're not talking about future value of Rolexes, and I don't have to look into my glass ball, which I don't have, right? I don't necessarily need to answer your question in regards to the actual brand, H. Moser. A few people ask me about it. I don't really have a whole lot of experience with H. Moser. I have handled the watches. I've never really sold them. I don't have them on my website, so I can't really talk about the brand on its own. But what I liked about your question is, If I'm looking to find the most accurate market price for a watch, how would someone be able to calculate it? Everybody will tell you, and probably somebody in the comments will say, hey, go online, look on eBay, look on Chrono24, see what they're selling for new, used, and you should be able to gauge. True. That's very, very true. But I'll give you a little more in-depth information. Figure this, H. Moser is a minus 45 brand to a dealer. What does that mean? Watch retails $10,000, authorized dealer buys it at minus 45 off, and then if he's that good, he'll sell it to you at full retail. Most likely he'll get you a decent discount up to, let's say, 30, maybe up to 25, maybe 35% off, depending on what kind of relationship you have with that particular dealer and how bad does he really want to sell that watch. So right off the bat right there, you know that if you're looking to go brand spanking new, anything up to 45 off, you're buying it at dealer cost, right? So you can kind of say, well, you know what, if this dealer is willing to give it to me at 45 off, he's really probably desperate to sell this particular watch, and therefore I got a smoking deal on a brand new one. On the pre-owned end, this is where you really do have to take to the internet, but I told you, internet prices tend to be a little bit inflated. For what? Fees on various platforms, Chrono24, eBay, Amazon, Overstock, First Dibs. The only places that don't cost money to us is our own platforms. For me, it would be my own website. That's why I always want people to buy from my website, because I don't incur any fees outside of credit card fees, right? I also said before, pay with a bank wire. You can also always ask for additional discount. So check places like Chrono24, check places like eBay, look on various websites that may have Moser and see what kind of prices the stuff is listed at and gauge it. And then you can gauge that price within 10 to 15%. And this goes for any brand out there. That goes for any model out there. For the most part, a lot of these prices are going to be within range. The higher prices you're going to find on the bigger platforms. Like StockX, for example, their prices might be a little bit higher because they are making a fee on top of what I'm selling. Why? They have expenses. StockX is a humongous company. Rule out, Guild, Overstock, Amazon, eBay. Think of the expenses that these companies have on a monthly or daily or hourly basis, right? So they have to make a certain margin. They have a strict formula by which they go by. This is the minimal margin that I have to make. A company like mine, who seemingly is a big company, we have over 100 million in sales, we're still not in a position where we're saying, oh, I must make 10% on this particular watch, otherwise I'm losing money. Yes, if I did the calculations, some of it would stay true because we do have quite high expenses, but they're nowhere near to compare to places like Chrono24, StockX, or any of the other big boys, so their markups tend to be a little bit higher. And dealers in turn list stuff a little bit higher because they take that fee. So if I know it's going to cost me 15% to sell my watch on Chrono24 or eBay, I'm going to list that slightly higher, somewhere in between, to be competitive with other dealers versus actually making a profit on this particular watch. Check out the websites. The websites that are not platforms, but websites that actually sell the products. Those are the prices you might want to gauge. And you can use that as a rule of thumb, pretty much looking for any brand out there, whether it's H. Moser or anybody else. It's a pretty decent formula to follow. I also say an item is worth what one is willing to pay for it. So if you're out there looking for a particular watch, and there's not a whole lot of them out there, there's not a whole lot of Mosers for sale online, right? Let's say in comparison to Rolex, you might just have to bite the bullet and say, look, there's 3 sellers of this watch. One is selling it for 10, another is selling it for 12, another is selling it for 11. Is it worth 10, 11, or 12? I don't know. I'm willing to pay 10.5. Go out there, find it for 10.5, put it on yours, and enjoy it. And again, don't worry about it. It's just an expensive toy. Hope that helps. Next question is from Bradley Stroop. Hope I got that right. Roman, I wanted to get an Nautilus, but I'm not paying that kind of premium, so I'm looking for it at an AP. Okay, AP is still pretty popular too. My only issue is I hear there are scratch magnets. I don't do much to constitute a beater watch category. Outside of work, my life is pretty casual, but I hear they scratch just going into your pocket. Is this true? Yes, but not just for AP, but for particular finishes on particular watches. Let me show you. Do you see all the scratches here? Do you see all the scratches here? This watch is very old, and again, I'm not going to give away how old it is exactly. I'm going to talk about this watch separately. This watch is seemingly in beat-up condition, if you ask me, but it's not due to the fact that it's an AP. It's due to the fact that the design of the watch, stainless steel watches in particular, that have finishes that are both satin finishes, i.e. not shiny, and those that are shiny, sort of like around the bezel. The shiny parts of a lot of these watches are going to have hairline scratches from virtually anything. This is going to be the case for your Nautilus. This is going to be the case for a Royal Oak. This is going to be a case for a Rolex. This is going to be a case for every single watch out there that has a shiny finish. Unfortunately, that stands true for pretty much anything out there. Gold watches, that will scratch even worse. And the reason they'll scratch even worse is because it's softer material than stainless steel. Whoever told you that they scratch pretty much going into your pocket, I'm sorry, don't believe that. No watch is going to scratch by simply going into your pocket unless it, clips one of those jean clips that are on the outer side or something, or a zipper or something of that nature. But for the most part, watches do scratch, but they don't scratch as easily as you think. They really would have to scratch against a hard surface, and it's really going to take some time. For the buckle to get as scratched up as the one that I just showed you, that took probably 20 years. There's a reason this watch is unpolished, and again, I'll get into that in another episode. But I knew a guy a while back who was very big into watches, and watches that ranged from $500 to $15,000. He didn't discriminate. He was always a diversified collector. He bought what he liked. But he was extremely anal about his watches scratching, to the tune of having his wife, then girlfriend, now wife, would walk on the opposite side of him when he was holding his hand. So his watch hand would be here, his wife would always be on the right because he didn't want her to bump into his watch. On top of that, when he sat at his desk, and he was in the car business, when he sat at his desk, this is how the guy sat. I don't know if you guys can see that. Notice the watch is not touching the bottom. He would never do this because he didn't want the watch to get scratched on the bottom. But that was just his personality. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with that. This guy constantly bought, traded, sold watches, and every time he would trade in a watch or sell a watch, the watch looked brand spanking new as if he never wore it. Every single one of his watches was so mint that I would ask him, how many times did you wear this? And he'd say, I wear it for a few months. It doesn't look it, because of how he was. If you're someone that feels the same way, then you either have to go about wearing your watches the same way my guy did to ensure and, try not to breathe on it every single time. Or you just may be someone that shouldn't buy stainless steel watches because the fact is they all scratch. And eventually, after extensive wear, they become beaters. I think the terminology beater watch is often refers to something you wear on a daily, something you can beat up and not worry about it, and so on and so forth. Let me tell you my opinion. I think every watch should be a beater watch. Why? Because these are not stamps. These are not coins on which their condition depends on the value and collectability or rarity for that matter. And I discussed this before. You can always have this watch polished and made brand new by anyone that knows what they're doing and not have to worry about those scratches. So it sounds like you got a bit of a decision to make, but my only advice to you is you either don't breathe in your watch as much like my buddy did, or live with the fact that every watch pretty much can become a beater watch, not worry about it, and just worry about it after a few years when the watch becomes unattractive to you because it's all scratched up, and just get it taken care of. Hope that answers your question. Here's a good question from Crazy for Cars. Hey Roman, love your videos and the fact that you always explain everything with great details. Thank you. I wanted to ask you two questions. First, I wanted to know your opinion on custom engraved watches like the ones you see on Instagram, such as fully engraved Rolex Submariner, truly a work of art. I also wanted to know if a watch dealer does get a fully engraved watch affects its value considering the watch case is engraved as well, because if only the bracelet is engraved, you can always change it out, but if everything is engraved including the watch case, would it affect resale value in a bad or a good way? Why? Because I imagine it would cost a lot to get a watch completely engraved. Hopefully these questions make it on a future episode, but if not, thanks for the great vids anyway, and keep up the great content. Thanks again, Crazy for Cars, and I think your handle will probably have an answer to your question in it somehow. A lot of guys out there customize cars, right? They buy certain kits. There are cheaper kits out there, there are really expensive kits out there. There are plenty of kits for Mercedes, for Bentleys, for Ferraris, and even cheaper cars, right? People have always been into customizing, depending on what, if you're into cars, which looks like you are, Crazy for Cars, right? You're probably someone that wants to get out there, buy yourself a particular car, and then customize it. Watches are kind of the same thing. They get customized all the time. The most popular way of customizing a watch is to put diamonds on it. Then there was the wave of the Bamford watches with PVD and all those other wonderful things, right? And changing out the dials, making custom dials, personalizing them, engraving them just with your name on it or something on a dial of that nature, right? And now you see a slew of beautifully, beautifully engraved timepieces online. Take them for what they are. They are fully customized watch. Now, unlike cars, when you put a kit on a car, you can change it. But then if you took a Ferrari, a factory Ferrari that was red, right, and let's say it was something that you kept for 30 years and then decided to paint the car a completely different color, not original to how it came out of the manufacturer, that would definitely affect the value. Same thing here. Much like I told you, after set diamonds on a watch affect the value, or in the very least, you don't really get that value out of them, right? It's kind of like the same thing. I love the watches. There's some really crazy engraved pieces out there. I've seen it done on a Nautilus. I've seen it done on a Royal Oak. I've seen it done on popular Rolexes, and most people will cringe and say, oh my God, why would you do that to a Nautilus? Well, the gentleman that did it is not somebody that's concerned with the resale value, but is more concerned with the overall look of the watch. I've seen guys take a $100,000 watch, engrave it fully, add some diamonds to it, because this is what they like, and it goes in line with what I say. You buy what you like. Yes, it's going to affect the resale value unless it's something that's so gorgeous that somebody else who's like-minded or who has the same similar taste will pay you for that watch just because you can't find another one like it. Because a lot of these things are going to be one of a kind. If somebody did it by hand, you may find many similar ones, but you won't find another one just like it, right? And if the trend now, and you see this stuff all over IG, is to get your watches, get them engraved and have something different on your wrist, then that's going to stay within the value that you can buy that watch. Because if somebody's out there looking for this particular watch and you're looking to sell it, his only option is to go to this particular company and get it engraved the same way. He may take it off your hands slightly cheaper because now it's a pre-owned watch and it rolls. The minute this becomes unpopular, then the value is going to tank. I talked about, the Breitling Super Avengers, right? They were all iced out. That was a big hype on them. People were paying over a list for the steel models and then putting diamonds on them and selling them, making a good profit. Then that trend went out the window, and so did the value of those watches. And that's what usually happens with stuff like that. Bamford watches, same thing. They were pretty hot at one time. People were paying crazy monies for them. And right now, their value has tanked because everybody and their mother is doing PVD right now. And it's a lot more accessible. It's not a novelty anymore, so the market obviously is down. Hope that answers your question. Well, guys, that's it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as usual. Hit that like button if you like what you saw. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber to my channel. Share it with your friends that you may think will enjoy this content. Other than that, guys, I'll see you next Tuesday.